I'm here to help women reset and rewild, to embrace and prioritize the pauses in order to reclaim their peace and power. I'm Dr. Michelle Paris, director of the Poppy Clinic and founder and CEO of the Wild Collective. As a disruptor, naturopathic doctor, wife, and mama, I've created a global movement and sacred space for women to rise together. Here, you'll break through limitations, romanticize your life, and unlock the magic of your divine feminine power. My life's work is rooted in community, lifting women into their most powerful, authentic selves, while empowering clinicians to elevate their practices with a transformational, community-driven model. I lead a thriving, passion-fueled business and naturopathic practice brimming with abundance, where I can guide women to invigorate their lives through sisterhood and elevate healthcare with a cutting-edge transformational approach. I've witnessed firsthand in my practice how this model sparks consistent health transformation, creates flourishing communities, and brings profitable success. You can have it all, a life filled with abundance, contagious joy, and untethered potential. So pull up a seat. It's time to pour into yourself and tap into your intuition and design a life that's wild, free, and uniquely yours. And I'm going to show you how. This is Wild Medicine.
I'm very excited we're back. We took a couple of week pause because we got sick and got busy and all the things, but we're back. Super excited. I'm going to let you take it away.
We're excited for today's episode. Okay. So today we are talking about why perimenopause weight loss feels impossible. And we're really excited for this episode. We have a lot to say. This is largely the population that we work with in Shed, menopause, postmenopausal, and we've been doing this a while. And so we get to see a lot. We've learned a lot, and we're excited to share a lot of what we've learned. So we are, to set the stage, who is this episode for? So this is for the woman who's in her late 30s, 40s, maybe even early 50s, who is really doing all the right things, but the weight is not budging. And a lot of the women that we serve in Shed, they're doing all the things that used to work, right? All the things that they used to do. They know how to do the things, build the plate, move their body. And then all of a sudden it feels like there's been a shift. And we hear this all the time. They're like, I know it's hormonal, right? Like it's that phase of life where so much is changing. And it's a really confusing state. It's a really confusing time. And a lot of our patients too come to us and they say, you know, there's almost like this blaming of themselves, right? That like, it's like they feel like it's their willpower or it's some kind of deficit on their part without understanding that there are a lot of shifts that actually happen during this phase of life. A lot is happening hormonally, biologically, and that's what we're going to get into today. All of those very real shifts that happen during this phase of life and what you should know about your body to help you break through that plateau and get those results and get you just feeling better, feeling like yourself again, because that is so valuable
totally.
when you
so
feel
let's
so stuck
first define
in your
what
own body.
perimenopause is and what it isn't, because right now perimenopause is having a hot minute, and that's so exciting because we've waited a really long time to create a ripple for women's health, for it to get the attention that it deserves. But the consequence of that is now I think we have everyone coming to our office thinking every symptom that they're experiencing is because of perimenopause. I'm so sorry for dinging. I've turned off my phone. I was hoping it would make it okay, but I can't. Oh, that should be good. What is perimenopause? Perimenopause starts around the age of late 30s to 40s. This is an interesting part of the conversation because I think for a long time, I think people thought perimenopause was just that short window before we actually have the cessation of our period, which is menopause is actually one day. And then we're in postmenopause. The definition of menopause is no period for an entire 12-month period. So all of those symptoms that women talk about leading up to the cessation of her period is perimenopause. And it can start as early as around the age of 37. I'm currently 44 as we record this episode. And I would say this was the first year that you could chalk up a lot of my symptoms to genuine perimenopause. So it really can happen at any age for women. And let's talk about what this looks like. So in the beginning, it is really the fluctuation of our female sex hormones. And the reason why I think we've done a lot of episodes on this, but just to clarify, in case this is the first time you've ever listened to us, we treat the woman and we treat the symptoms in front of us. We actually don't test for perimenopause. There is no test for perimenopause. There's actually this really incredible chart where they looked at 100 women all going through perimenopause. And what that graph demonstrates is that hormones can be high or low and everything in between, and it still is categorized as perimenopause. So there is no quintessential high estrogen or low progesterone or vice versa to diagnose it. We are treating the woman before us who has a symptom expression that could be really chalked up to, after ruling everything out, like vitamin deficiency and other things going on, as perimenopause. So because estrogen doesn't just decline steadily, it fluctuates wildly. This is the part that can be very confusing to women. It's not a very easy thing to share, but what women most often come into our office saying is that hormonally, they feel like something is not like it was. The things that worked in their, 20s and 30s are no longer working for them, that certain symptoms feel amplified. So, if it's weight redistribution or sleep changes or appetite changes, this is where there's an intersection between metabolic health and perimenopause. And perimenopause often is amplified by having metabolic concerns. And this is why I think this conversation is so important, that women understand this better, because it's not so much understanding the chicken or the egg, like what comes first. It's about making sure that we're on top of handling all of everything that the woman is experiencing to have a better, a better intervention and a better conversation around what's available for her to properly treat. So the hormones that are involved in perimenopause, the two most probably commonly known are estrogen and progesterone. When we reach menopause, all of our hormones, especially from our ovaries, are no longer being secreted at the same level for the body. And so this has impacts, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But the estrogen progesterone piece is where a lot of us feel period length changes. This is where we start to see weight changes. This is where we start to see hot flashes and night sweats and mood changes. Testosterone, cortisol, and insulin are also impacted. And I think Tara and I would both speak to the complexity of treating women. We have a much larger orchestration of hormones. And so we are quite complex to treat. And so it's really important you're working with someone who understands the complexity and the interrelationship of all of these hormones, because once one gets impacted, that's going to impact all the other hormones downstream. So it's really important that you're having these conversations to better understand, do you have insulin resistance? Is your cortisol elevated? Do we suspect that your estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone are fluctuating or declining with age? Truly, none of these operate in isolation. And so you can never just, read something online in isolation and assume that's what you have. It's so much more complex than that. And that's why it's really important that you work with someone that you trust, that can have way more advanced conversation around what this actually looks like. And, one thing that we really want to highlight is that this is not only a reproductive shift, it is a metabolic transition. There are hormonal consequences when our estrogen and progesterone start to behave more erratically. One of the things that we talk about is, if we were to test, whether it's through blood work or saliva or urine, there are lots of tests out there available for patients to assess hormone levels. If your hormones came back month 1 and your estrogen was high, your progesterone is low, it is just as likely the following month that your estrogen could come back low and your progesterone high. And this is why we don't test. This is why we treat the woman who's experiencing symptoms as a result of the erratic nature. Perimenopause was once defined as having a period 5 days longer or shorter than your normal period cycle. Now we're looking at the fact that women can have symptom expression before that happens. I fit into that category where sleep disruption was my first real keynote sign of perimenopausal shifts, especially in my luteal phase when progesterone probably isn't as high as it used to be historically. You really want to be sure that you're working with someone who understands all of these shifts because it's nuanced, and no, not everything that you're currently experiencing, even if you are in this age category, can be chalked up to being perimenopause. So we want to be very clear on that.
Absolutely. And, we mentioned that weight is part of that shift. And there's so many reasons why that's the case. As hormones fluctuate, so much changes. And one of the things that we wanted to share was that as you go through this phase of life, one of the changes, it affects your muscle mass. Estrogen has a really big role when it comes to our muscle mass. And muscle mass does go down often in this phase of life. And when that happens, and we'll talk a lot more about exercise later on in this episode, but it changes our basal metabolic rate. And our basal metabolic rate is the number of calories that you burn at rest. And that is really dictated by how much muscle mass we have. And when that number goes down, let's say we're eating at maintenance calories. And so we're not losing weight and we're not gaining weight, essentially. But if all of a sudden that number goes down without your knowledge, then if you're still eating the same thing, you're still eating those maintenance calories or what you think are your maintenance calories, because your basal metabolic rate has gone down, now you might actually be eating in an excess, not because you changed the foods you're eating, but because your body is changing how it utilizes that fuel. And that is I think when women hear that and understand that, and we can see that through our InBody, when we run scans for women, we can see what their basal metabolic rate is. That is such a light bulb moment, because so often for women, they say, well, I haven't changed my diet, so I don't understand why I'm gaining this weight. Like, it feels so random so often. And what we tend to see often is that when that shift happens and when they're slowly gaining weight consistently, some of the approaches that they take, and as we said, the old things often don't work in this phase of life. And something that I see often is something like fasting, right? And I'm curious to hear your perspectives on this too, but when I have women go through and explain their fasting patterns, right? Like, let's say they're skipping breakfast or they're just shortening their eating window. Often I see a couple of things. So first, when they do that, like, let's say they're not eating breakfast every day, I find that it's really hard to hit those protein targets and fiber targets. And because they're taking a whole meal out of their day, it doesn't mean that necessarily their calories are changing, right? If you're eliminating a meal, likely your calories are going down. But if they're still having 2 large meals and then maybe like a afternoon snack and an evening treat, they might have actually made up those calories, but they're taking away a good source of protein that they typically would have in the morning.
Reason my
Do you see
eyeballs
that often as
fell
well?
out of my head almost is that this is 100% the reason why I gained weight. This was, I would say, the main root cause was that intermittent fasting was having a real strong presence in medicine at the time. And I think the research was really compelling. The research was on men, not women. Unfortunately, that should have been a bigger part of the conversation. And I think if we do anything episodically for a short period of time, anyone is going to experience some physiological or anti-inflammatory benefit, which is what I think I was experiencing in the beginning and felt so encouraged and started advocating for, and then ended up causing weight loss resistance in my own body and did witness patients too. I agree with you. I think now fully understanding metabolic health too, and the importance of front loading our day and making sure we're balancing our blood sugar in the morning, you can just see how this is just so backwards for so many of us. And then we end up completely mystified. Not only that, but we've probably caused some pretty significant blood sugar dysregulation. And so we are making up for those calories, and we're probably making poor food choices later in the day as a result of not properly front loading our day.
Oh,
Absolutely. Yeah, you feel that lack of fuel, right? Yeah, and I talk to women so much about this too, and it comes up a lot, right? Intermittent fasting. And when we talk about someone's day, like we all live busy lives, right? If you have no fuel in your body in the morning, but you're going to your stressful job or you're running around getting the kids out the door, that's stressful, right? Cortisol is going up and there's no blunting effect from fiber and protein in your body. Like you're running on fumes, right? And so then you're shaky and then you're starving and then you grab the chocolate bar at 12 o'clock when you can eat because your fasting window's over, right? A lot of women that we work with that are kind of in this cycle, they feel really out of control. Like they feel starving all the time and they're just on that blood sugar roller coaster. So I find often it's not a great strategy, especially at this phase of life when you likely have a really busy life. Like you need that fuel in the morning. We see the research is so great for, as you said, front loading our day. We need those calories in the morning. We need the protein in the morning. And again, if someone is taking out a whole meal, right? Meals are for most people where we get a good chunk of protein. A snack isn't going to make up likely 30 plus grams of protein. And so if we're removing that source of protein, now we're really under protein. Maybe calories are a bit lower, but maybe not. And we're just making it up. Maybe there's more carbs, maybe there's more fat. And when it comes to our metabolic health, muscle is, again, we'll talk about muscle very soon, but that's the metabolic driver. We need more muscle, and protein is the fuel for our muscles. And so that's a big thing that we see. I would say another thing, and again, we will get into all of the exercise pieces, but resistance training at this phase of life, which means lifting heavy weights regularly, is so important. It is so important. And, when we talk about your basal metabolic rate, those number of calories you need that you burn every day, more muscle, more calories that you will burn, right? It is truly for our metabolic health. It is vital that we are lifting weights consistently. And we still I see this all the time in practice, is that, when I think about exercise and lifting weights. And for those that don't know, I became a personal trainer at the end of last year because it's what our patients needed. It really was. And something that I reflected on so much when I was doing all that training is that no one ever taught women how to lift weights, right? That is like, I remember doing that training, going through that course, and I mind blown, like, wow. And talking to my husband about it, and he's like, oh yeah, right. Yeah, I know, like the reps and the sets. And I'm like, wow, no one taught women how to do that. It was, yeah, no, you go on the treadmill, right? You go do your walks, do your incline walks, which is great. I love an incline walk, but we need to build muscle, right? And you're not going to get bulky. Like, it's so hard to actually get bulky. It's so hard. But even just building a pound or a few pounds of muscle, that can transform your body's metabolic health and your ability to use calories very effectively. And that's another reason why the old approaches don't work. Your body is different. Your body has different needs. We have to fuel your muscle. When you're younger, you can get away with it. You can get away with not building muscle mass, but it becomes so obvious in perimenopause. If you are not building that muscle mass, you will feel it and you will hit a plateau with your weight.
So let's talk about what's actually driving the shift in weight change in this perimenopausal phase. First, let's talk about estrogen. So the eventual shift, even though some months estrogen can be high, the eventual shift into menopause is that estrogen becomes lower. What happens is a redistribution of where we put on body fat. So instead of it being predominantly put on our hips and thighs, is that it gets redistributed to our central weight gain and increase in visceral fat. I have a hot take on this. So obviously, we talk about visceral fat a lot, but visceral fat is this harmful fat that cushions our organs. There's no physiological benefit to having visceral fat, and it poses a lot of health risks long term. It is largely responsible for chronic disease development, cancers. it is a harmful fat that our body doesn't need on the body. And so when estrogen declines, we stop directing fat towards safer areas like hips and thighs and instead to our organs and increasing our visceral fat, which we measure at the clinic, and we help guide patients better understand what this means and what our targets are for visceral fat. Because I work with women in Wild Collective too, and I spend a lot of time thinking about like the primal drive of attraction and connection and all these pieces. I think this shift, because we know women will come in and they will talk about central adiposity, this increase in belly fat, and it's highly distressing, even for leaner individuals. If their whole lives they had no weight on their abdomen, I find this really like psychologically interesting, the level of distress it causes us as a society. And you could go so many ways with this, but I find this very interesting from like a primal perspective. But I think historically, that X frame is what's talked about for a woman being very curvy. This can be very challenging to someone who saw themselves as a very feminine being prior to this. And then this shift is not only changing your brain and changing your capacity and changing everything about your body, but I actually think this is why it can be distressing by so many women at this change, is that it is really redefining how you see yourself. And so even though a lot of people around you be like, what are you talking about? Belly fat, you don't have belly fat. I think this is why we shouldn't downplay a woman's story, is how distressing it can be when you've identified yourself as maybe, having childbearing hips and being this very feminine frame, to transitioning to being a more hormonally inert human and seeing a redistribution of adiposity. That can be quite distressing. And I never judge a woman who comes to me in this age range, who feels quite distressed about that, because it's valid to her. It's important to her. Yes, there are health ramifications around visceral fat. That's a complex conversation of its own, but also to validate a woman's experience whose body is changing and she's doing all the things that she used to do. The more I dig deeper on what this means for a woman, her brain, her physiology, how the world sees her, how she sees herself in the world, this can be a highly distressing moment. We know this because we see and we have these intimate conversations. And as women shed what no longer serves them, it is amazing the feminine expressions that start to bloom as a result of shedding what no longer serves them. So I just want to validate that this hormonal shift, not only are there hormonal shifts that are very real and pose health risks, they also can challenge your thinking around what it means to be a woman to you. And those things matter too. And I think the more that I sit in circles and talk to women about these things, the more I know that deep down, there are certain things that feel divinely feminine to us that are very valid and important, that also need chatting through and talking through, and what that means for us. And it doesn't necessarily also the permission that your body will change as you age. It would be weird if it didn't.
Do you feel confused about what tests to ask for and how to interpret them? Because everyone keeps telling you everything looks fine, but you don't feel fine. We see you, and we have created a guide for that. I understand that women want to participate and take an active role in their health. And one way we can do that is starting to advocate for better, more comprehensive testing, but then also be able to be part of the conversation, whether or not those labs are within optimal range, not just within normal ranges. We have a guide, a lab test guide, that walks you through the most common tests that can be done annually, that will help you start to build this beautiful health binder on yourself so that you can co-create your health and you can start to see if imbalances arise and how to work with your health professionals in order to make a strategic plan to move the needle forward in our health. One of the most common things that are missed in the healthcare space, especially when we're feeling off, is this higher level conversation around more integrative testing and optimal ranges to help you feel your best. So no longer feel mystified. Go download our free lab test guide. The link is in the show notes, and use it to have more strategic and effective conversations with your health professionals. Enjoy.
But this requires a more complex conversation of grief and of transition that we largely don't allow people to do as these very important shifts happen in our lifetime. So I just that's my hot take.
No, I'm actually really glad that you said that, because I think often what we hear from women is they
Right.
feel that and they feel like they shouldn't feel that. It's like almost taboo, and it should just be, well, just be happy with your body and all of the things. And it's yes, and you are allowed to have those feelings. You are allowed to want to feel sexy again and all of the things, right? It's like, why are we told that that feeling is not valid for us, right? And I think, and we've talked about this, and I think there's a lot of value to the body positivity movement, but I think that sometimes it also discredits women's feelings, especially in this phase of life. When you're very used to your body looking and feeling a certain way, and maybe nothing has changed, but all of a sudden it feels out of control, right? It feels very confusing. A lot of women say that they feel almost mystified or betrayed by their own body because they feel like they're doing all the right things. It creates this shame and this guilt. And at the same time, we're told that it's not okay to feel that way. So I'm really glad you said that, because I think that that's really validating. And it's okay to feel however you're feeling, right? Like it is all allowed, and we're going to hold space
and
for
I
all
think
of
like
that.
the
That's
more we do
all
this
part of
work and get
health, right?
curious instead of critical, is I see in circles a different story play out. And so I know for so many of us, I think we've thought that society imprinted this on us, and that this is the patriarchy and all these other pieces. And sure, some parts of that are definitely true. I was definitely influenced by very unhealthy magazines from a very young age. So body dysmorphia was a familiar foe. And there are things that are primal and visceral that also deserve room. And so the more I look into the historics, the more I try to understand what the divine feminine is, the more we look at like why women put fat on in certain places to create this curvature that the male gaze finds quite beautiful. When those shift, it can really challenge your image, and it has nothing per se to do with what society says, but much more a primal, like, I am changing and I don't know that I'm comfortable with this change. And grief and curiosity deserve a spot at that table too, is all I want to say. Is like, I feel like we are so quick to vilify and create division amongst genders and all these pieces. And yet the more I look into it, I'm like, how much of this is actually like how we are divinely orchestrated and a part of this? And so it just deserves to be part of the conversation. And we know one-on-one we're having these conversations. So we're going to be honest about it here so that more women know they're not alone. If this feels confronting to them, you're definitely not alone. Other hormonal changes, we could talk about that all day, and maybe we will one day. Insulin resistance rising. I think this would probably be the most common lab we find out of reference range, or that is suboptimal for majority of our patients who are interested in our metabolic weight loss program. The interesting thing about when insulin is responsible for driving glucose into the cells and fat deposition. And so not only when so what happens is when we become less effective at this through many means, and sleep disruption and stress being two very important ones, muscle loss being another important one, is that type 2 diabetes is this state where there's a surplus of glucose in the bloodstream, but the cells of the body don't recognize it. It means we're becoming less effective as a machine at driving glucose into the cells. And so what ends up happening, especially in a chronic state of stress, is that our body is secreting more insulin to try and do a better, more effective job because we've become metabolically less efficient. And this poses obviously increased visceral fat risk and inflammation and redistribution of where we're putting fat. So we want to make sure that we're mindful of this piece. It also dysregulates our appetite. We actually tend to feel hungrier because our cells, even though there's tons of nutrients in the bloodstream, or glucose, let's say, for the specifics of the conversation, the cells feel starving. And so this creates this disconnection of the body. The body's not, the feedback loop isn't working appropriately. And therefore we see this increase of insulin resistance, which increases our risk of diabetes development. And I would say most of our patients have some level of this when they come see us, and it's irrespective of age. Muscle loss, I think this is a big one. I was saying to Tara, like, I think this is the thing that we need to spend a lot of time thinking about, talking about. And I know we do, but even more so, like, we have this unique privilege of seeing everybody's muscle mass and visceral fat and fat mass. And we get to become like really precision oriented around body composition. And I really do believe that statement of sitting is the new smoking, because in theory, as long as we keep our muscle mass high, we don't really see metabolic shifts until over the age of 60. But if we don't build muscle and move muscle as it is required at this age, we see increased metabolic dysfunction, even in a younger population, even as young as 40, where we're looking at labs going like, this patient shouldn't be responding to this program this way. She's way too young. But what she is way too under-muscled. That's really what we're saying. So it's not age dependent until over 60. It's muscle dependent. So this muscle loss contributes greatly to this hormonal chaos that isn't working for someone's metabolic health. It's decreasing our metabolic rate. As Tara said, it's our metabolic machine. It burns more calories. It is fit. It is equipped. And our muscle is what drives our metabolism long term. It is the organ of longevity. It is so important. It is no longer a nice to have to exercise. It is absolutely essential that we are lifting heavy things and building muscle mass. As we lose muscle, our glucose uptake worsens. Hence, we increase our insulin resistance. And you can see this is why we can't look at hormones in isolation. Everything has a consequence to everything else. And that's why this is a way more complex conversation, and why you shouldn't be taking health information from health influencers online who have no background or degree in health, physiology, or medicine. They are not equipped to have this conversation. So just because they have a link to something to sell you does not make them equipped. It's dangerous. Cortisol elevation is very, especially in North American society, seems to be so normalized, right? We're all in burnout. We're all accessible at all times. There's no unplug or rest for any of us. And so the messaging to our body when we are in fight or flight like this all the time is that we are truly, the body thinks we're running away from a bear. It's terrifying to your body and nervous system to be in a sympathetic overdrive mode all day. That's a lot for anybody's physiology to hold, but it also has grave consequences from a metabolic perspective. Our hunger increases because we're trying to escape. Right? Like our body's like, please flee, get yourself into the cave, get safe before we have to like famine for a while. So there is this, physiological drive where our body is quite archaic in its design that wasn't built for modern day era stress. And so because stress is so pervasive to us now, our phones, media, our ability to be distracted, we're really in an elevated cortisol state for most of the day, and many of us even while we sleep. So if we're not properly preparing ourselves for sleep, our body's still in fight or flight, right? Mouth breathing, all these other things. We could go on and on about this, but the more our cortisol rises, our hunger increases, our sleep worsens, our inflammation rises. And this is often when we see patients, they're often really uncomfortable in their body. Something feels off. And this is typically the pattern that we see. Sleep disruption is very high in perimenopause. Like I said, I am someone who's now currently experiencing it. I would say, even though I was a mouth breather for most of my life, I was a good sleeper. I could fall asleep, definitely stay asleep. I was never waking. That is not fun in perimenopause. I think I went like a week and was like, nope, I need to work with someone to help me with this. This is unsatisfactory. For so many women, this is why it's so exciting that perimenopause is having a moment. For so many women, we suffered for years because so many doctors would say derogatory things like, this is just a part of aging, get over it. There's so much out there available to us, but sleep disruption is a huge cause of weight gain. for a number of reasons. It increases our cortisol, our recovery drops, our activity declines. We tend to sleep less. I think studies have shown that if you have sleep deprivation, you tend to eat anywhere between 200 to 300 calories more per day. So you're in a caloric surplus, but your body is more stressed. It's going to deposit more fat. It's going to be more insulin resistant. So you can see how this perpetuates itself. And yeah, really, this is an interconnected problem. It is not an isolated problem. And that's why you need to work with someone who is equipped to help you with the complexity, especially with women, the complexity and the beauty of our hormonal orchestration. But it is complex and it needs to be well understood with the person that you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do we do about it? What needs to change? So we've talked a bit about movement throughout this episode, but it really is a non-negotiable in this phase of life. And I actually had a patient recently who said, I don't believe you can build muscle mass when you're in your 50s. And it was so interesting. And I was like, why do you think that? Because we see that all the time. We see anyone can build muscle mass at any age, right? I think it's still a lot of these antiquated beliefs about, like muscle weightlifting and muscle mass, that's for the young people, right? But it's not. And we have the technology, we have our InBody machine where we track this with our patients. We can see this. And it's very common for patients after they graduate from SHED, when we do their 1 month follow-up, their 2 month follow-up, I see all the time, they're building muscle and they continue to lose body fat. Those are real shifts, right? You can build muscle mass at any age, and it is so important that you do so. And even just starting with just like we talk all the time about a weighted vest, right? And I always say, for the busy moms who are doing a million things, like just put a weighted vest on, do your cooking, do your laundry, like just do something, right? Like that's a great way to habit stack. Do some squats while you're brushing your teeth, right? Like it can be simple. It can be simple, right? It can be so simple, but it needs to happen and it needs to be part of the routine. So building that time, protecting that time, right? And I think that, this phase of life is also such a unique one where for so many women, when they're in their 40s, they're at the peak of their careers, they still have pretty young kids who need them, right? There's so much on their plate. The demands are unreal. Specifically at this phase of life, right? Often, I talk about this a lot. Often, if someone has kids, right, their daughter is going through puberty while they're going through perimenopause. That's challenging. There's a lot of hormonal fluctuations in the household, right? Like it is, in so many ways, it is a challenging phase of life. And that's where making yourself a priority becomes challenging, because there's so many demands on your time. And so there are some things, and this is what we really support our patients with too, is coming back to yourself. And it's a reminder to yourself that you are worthy of exercise. You're worthy of the meal prep and all of the things that are going to support you and nourish you long term. And so movement is one of those, right? It is a non-negotiable and something that and Dr. Alana Polo said this, and I thought it was such a great way to say this when she came in and she did a talk for at our clinic and in our community. And she said, there's a few ways to get into a caloric deficit. You can move more or eat less. And she said, I like a bit of both. And I just thought it was a great way of saying it and kind of like putting that all together, right? And so, both are, the nutrition is important and the movement is important. If you do a bit of both, great. You're setting yourself up for success. So movement's a piece of that. Of course, nutrition is such a big piece of that, right? And really helping people is what we're so passionate about, is helping women and men. We're talking about women mostly, but we help a lot of men too. But really understand what their body needs in terms of nutrition, right? And, a patient said this to me before. She's like, this needs to be taught in school at some point, right? Like how to actually fuel your body, because we don't know. Nobody actually taught us. Like she was saying to me, she said, so how do you know if I'm in a deficit? And how do you know what my maintenance calories are? And I told her, I'm like, well, I look at your InBody and then use some fancy calculations, which I'll teach you. But there are formulas for this. It's not a shot in the dark. It's not it feels like that. And I think a lot of other programs, they perpetuate that of keeping you in the dark, right? Whether they give you colors for foods or points for foods, it's like, no, you can understand the caloric and nutritional needs of your body. I believe you are wise and you are smart and you can handle this information. You don't need colors or points or whatever it is. No, you need to understand your body's needs. You can get there and you can learn to fuel yourself. But we don't want to contribute to this mystification of your body. We're going to teach you how to track your food so that you are not reliant on us forever, right? We want you to understand that so that you can do that and you can modify that and you can tune into your own body without relying on some external system
I
of
think you
colors
just
or
helped me a
numbers or
lot there
whatever
as
it
to why
is,
people
right?
stay on those programs forever.
Yeah.
If you've
Yeah.
been counting points, you probably never feel like you cannot count points. You don't trust your body inherently. You don't understand it. You're counting points. That's, yeah, wow.
Yeah. 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 And I think, that's just, it's so disempowering. I think it's so disempowering because it keeps you confused, right? And something that we've talked about in other episodes is that you can overeat nutritious foods, right? It's very possible. And we see it all the time. Like we've talked both about how the olive oil we used to use, and that's not to say that olive oil is bad or any food is bad or good. Food is information, it's fuel, right? And the more that you understand that, the less mystified you are by your body and by the results that you are achieving, right? So that's something that we really want to teach our patients. And also a part of this too is understanding that carbs are not the enemy. I think that it's such a paradigm shift. And I think we've gone through so many phases of fat is bad and terrible. And like there's like the phase of the moment. And I think we're coming out of the villainizing carb phase. And I have this conversation so often with patients in maintenance when we really start to work on exercise. You need carbs for recovery. You do. You really, really do. Your body, you will feel it. I feel it. If I don't have enough carbs, recovery after a tough workout, after lifting heavy weights, it's hard. You really do need that. And so helping patients understand that and use them strategically, right? Sometimes when, and I think a lot of patients, they think about carbs equals donuts, right? And it's like, no, but carbs are also sweet potatoes and, regular potatoes and quinoa. And like there's so many healthy sources of carbs that really fuel your body. And carbs are fiber, right? We need fiber in our body. It's so important, even from a cholesterol perspective. Fiber binds to cholesterol and helps to eliminate it, right? There are lots of pieces of the puzzle that are so important. But again, and you said about online, the influencers, the this, the that, they don't have all the information. They don't understand all of the pieces. They are told to sell one piece of the pie, and so they do. But they don't understand how all of the things connect. They don't understand your physiology, your changing physiology. And it's just so important. And then you mentioned like sleep and stress and the nervous system and all of those pieces. And it's such a big piece. And I think, in Shed, every day there is a recorded mindset call. And it is so many of our patients, and we both firmly believe that is the key to long-term success. It really is. The nervous system. And when you were talking about that too, of cortisol, I was thinking that for so many people, even our downtime we spend our downtime scrolling on our phones. And that is such a high stimulation state. Like we are not actually disconnected. We're not actually resting. Like we are staying in this like 10 out of 10, even in rest, right? And that has such an effect on our body. And something we talk about in Shed and Wild and in our offices is, what are you doing for joy? Right? Where's joy? And we've talked about this on other episodes, but a lot of us use food for joy. That's the source of joy. And let's shift that. Let's find other sources of joy in your life so that you're not dependent on food to fill that void. That's a part of shed. That is a shift that needs to happen for long-term success.
This episode is brought to you by our Shed Metabolic Reset program. Look, I know there's a lot of programs out there and it can be very overwhelming, especially when it comes to weight loss and long-term fat loss and finding the right program for you. We have an incredible metabolic reset program, one that does thorough investigative work up front, looking at blood work metrics, helping educate you, a really solid, simple plan to follow in the reset phase, as well as long-term education around how to maintain your weight loss for the long term, how to optimize your health, how to increase metabolic flexibility, and how to build your plate so that you are nourished and the strongest version of yourself. Our program includes a lot of care and support with our integrative healthcare team. It is a medically supported program. We include community support, education support, as well as daily mindset calls. We are all about optimizing your health for the long term. This is the exact program that helped me shed 30 pounds and keep it off for 4 years and counting. So if you feel like a reset is something you would like to consider, a pause to help calibrate, come home to yourself, lower inflammation, boost your energy, learn how to confidently build your plate for longevity, then please head over to poppyclinic.com and you will see that there is a pop-up quiz that will get the process started of seeing if Shed Metabolic Reset program could be for you. If it is, we will connect, and I cannot wait to support you in living the most aligned, harmonious life, one that reclaims peace and confidence in your body and teaches you how to eat for long-term health. I'll see you soon.
You have to be so mindful to create sources of joy in your life in this world that we live in, because you can just stay on the hamster wheel of all your responsibilities and all of the things. And if you really want to make a long-term change, if you want to regulate your cortisol and all of the pieces, you need to find joy. You need to find what fills your cup. That is so, so important. You can't make up for that in other ways. It's so important. And sleep, as you talked about, right? That is something that is challenging at this phase of life. And it's exactly what you already said, but we do eat more. We see that in the research. Recovery is so much harder if you're not sleeping. Then you don't have the energy to meal prep and exercise. And the cascade of effects is just, it goes on and on. Right. And so, again, I think something that we really wanted to articulate in this episode, too, is just it's so multifactorial, right? It's not just eat less. It's not just eat less. It's all of the things, putting all of the pieces together.
I agree with everything you said. First of all. Second of all, so when we were doing our research for this episode in particular and everything that we have coming up, which was really exciting, we did a quick little sweep of the internet and found that we really are one of the only, if not the only program that has built in a strategic mindset part of this approach. I mean, I think Tara and I bonded over our love of understanding psychology and mindset and how to rewire neuroplasticity and mirror neurons and all of these things that really explain why humans are so complex and why it can't be an oversimplified answer for anything with respect to health. It was also the key reason Dr. Tara wanted to be a part of Shed. At first, she was like, no, this is not my wheelhouse. I'm not interested. And then she saw the nature of the conversations and understood that what we're doing is distinctly different. And I truly want to highlight Shed and the work that we do and the people that we serve appropriately, because I think it is really special and important, is understanding that weight loss is so much more complex than just hormones, nutrition, and the physiology, that body. There is a mind that has been wired a certain way since infancy, really. And there are certain beliefs and challenges and perspectives that we hold that we don't necessarily recognize are impairing our ability to grow, evolve, and change. And so we really wanted to build in an opportunity for all of our patients. And we're quite clear, we don't want to work with patients who are not interested in this part, right? Because it's not going to be a fit, because our true core belief is that unless you're willing to do the deeper work, it's going to be very hard to have long-term transformation. And because we really want to create a new way in which we're supporting people, that this is truly their last stop, that we're not contributing to diet culture, that we are liberating women and men out of this nasty cycle of not feeling good, of not feeling worthy, of feeling very mystified and disempowered. It's just not what we tolerate for our patients. And so until you're really ready for that part, respectfully, we will do our best to be like, now is probably not the time. So for us, the differentiator is the mindset piece, that instrumental. And there are daily mindset calls for our patients to have access to help facilitate, and in maintenance and ongoing, because we really believe in the power of this piece for helping patients move beyond the trap of weight loss and regain and weight loss and regain and weight loss and regain that becomes incredibly more difficult in this perimenopause phase, which we've been able to articulate from a physiological perspective why that is so challenging. But we want to go one step deeper. So we want to speak to the emotional experience of the patient that sits across from us. We want to understand what's going on with them. We want to talk through grief and frustration and body shame and loss of identity, and allow the space for it. Like I was even saying with the estrogen piece and the X frame, or being seen as feminine and losing that feminine shape, you might be surprised at how that confronts you and be like, I didn't realize I cared. But there's something coming up for me where I feel less than a woman, or I feel grief that I'm like, I cry at the idea of not having my period because it means I'm not fertile. I am not interested in having babies. But there's something there for me that I'm surprised I feel. The thing is, knowing that that is an experience doesn't make it any less true or not valid, right? Like, we need to acknowledge that these things are real for us. We need to acknowledge that we might feel grief around our body changing, that we might feel shame that cookies have power over us. There's so much there that we need to hold space for and not criticize and not judge and give voice to. We've recently made one of our mindset calls available for patients to access, not patients, people want to learn more about why shed? Why would I do this extra level? Why would I go that? Why would I allow that to come to the surface? And the call in particular that we selected was really this welcoming of just the reality that those things are there. That these shadow parts of us, that not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy, not trusting ourselves. Most times we don't have a willpower problem with food prep and going to the gym. Patients tell us all the time that they're scared to go to the gym, of the judgment of not wanting to wear gym clothes, of not knowing what weights to lift, right? Like, if we don't identify these as real barriers to change, we are missing a huge piece of the puzzle. If you are unwilling to see how saying you want something, but doing something different is never going to get you, then we are failing you as practitioners. And I think that's really important to understand, like, the why. Right? It's like, yeah, you can say something so simple like, oh, I don't have time. Or we can help reposition that and say, well, it's not a priority, right? Like, let's take the shame away, or let's take the victim consciousness away, and let's really speak to what's coming up and welcome it, not judge it, but befriend these parts of ourselves. You know how lovely, that analogy, you catch more flies with honey than vinegar? Same, right? We are way more okay with and moving through tough stuff when we can learn to be compassionate. In fact, one of the most powerful studies in menopause has to do with being compassionate. Those who have less symptoms of menopause tend to be more compassionate to their experience. It's that clear. So if we want to really transform, really see behavior change, then we're going to have to befriend the parts of ourselves that we don't like. The part that hits snooze in the morning, the part that who like fights tooth and nail the food prep on Sundays. If we are unwilling to sit with that part of ourselves and be like, welcome, it's okay that you're here. You're not bad and wrong. You were probably serving some kind of purpose back in the day. How do we redirect this energy? How do we shift this into actually looking at what we say we value? There are so many patients of ours. In fact, a patient shared with me last week about her stubbornness and not right, which awesome to be so honest, not easy to be that honest. But then to know if you're saying your value is health, yet you are unwilling to change your behaviors that would facilitate a healthier lifestyle, then don't be confused by your lack of results or you're defaulting back to how things used to be, right? We need to deal with what we call, or what I call, I think both of us would agree, that real root cause of why change is so hard. What is the real root cause? Why is it so hard to food prep? Why is it so hard to start lifting weights? Why is it so hard? It has a lot to do with not feeling lovable or unworthy or not trusting yourself or afraid of success. I spent an hour talking to my coach on Friday, way more how I actually sabotaged my success, not my failure, but my success. Being seen at that level, I was like, they're going to know I'm a pro. And I literally watched my business crumble as a result of not failure, but actually succeeding. How many of us are like, oh my gosh, what if I actually was seen as that feminine physique that I see in my mind's eye? And what if people started noticing me? How many women talk to us about when people actually start noticing that unless we learn to hold, and this is through the breath work and the nervous system and the mindset support that we've built in quite intentionally to give you the capacity to hold all the full expression of change. And that means people noticing and giving you attention that you may not have had. You know, for a lot of people will share with us a lot that part of the weight gain story is that they didn't want to be seen. They don't want to let people in. It is a physical barrier. When we take that away and we don't give tools, how do we expect that person not to pattern out? What are we going to do? Right? And so I think this is why we're so very honest about the kind of work that we do and how we're of service to our patients, because we know that we really have to get serious about the real root causes as to why anyone can lose weight in a deficit. It's the law of thermodynamics. We're not rocket scientists, okay? It's very basic. But how we help patients in maintenance sustain what they've shed has everything to do with actually addressing the real root cause as to why we self-sabotage in the first place. And I think that's the part that really needs to be expressed. And I think after doing a sweep, we felt most proud of is like, we're on top of this with our patients. We are ruthless. We can see that they are doing the calls. We are calling them on it. We are challenging them in visits. We're talking about self-sabotage. We are on purpose because we care to drive long-standing change. You know, I've talked about this a lot with dietitians who, you know, are in body positivity and intuitive eating, and all of these pieces have their place for the right patient. There's lots of resources. But there is this idea of creating neutrality around taking the charge out, right? I had to really take the charge out on my body. I had to take the charge out on food, not naming foods good or bad, not feeling betrayed by your body, but getting curious, not being so critical of what was going on, and creating a new kind of vocabulary and a new nervous system capacity to be able to hold. Oh, my weight went up this week. My weight went right back down. Well, I'm luteal. I'm probably retaining water. The amount of patients that have come in and been like, I retained 2 pounds of water at ovulation. I had no idea. It's like, that's the precision. That is the level of coming home to yourself and the attunement that we desire for our patients. That's what's so cool about having the composition tools, but then also giving them the health education and vocabulary and mindset pieces to start weave all of these pieces together so that they become the expert on themselves and they know what's going on with their body. And it takes time. And we really position our patients like, track for data reasons to create neutrality, to understand your body fully. And how many patients will come to us at their 1, 2, 3 month follow-ups and they're like, guess what else I've learned? Guess what other, right? It's like we've lived a whole life being others, outsourcing our power, learning about other, like, getting caught up in trends when what we really deserve is to become the authority and the most attuned with what works for our body. And Tara and I talk about this all the time. What works for her around food patterns and exercise and lifestyle is vastly different from what works for me. And there is no such thing as right or wrong. It's that we both are so attuned with our own bodies that we can swap ideas, swap recipes, talk through challenges, and then take what we need for what works for us and leave the rest and not feel like everyone's saying red light therapy is red light therapy. Everyone's saying intermittent, right? Like no more getting hijacked. Part of the piece of calling the clinic the Poppy Clinic was this precision, this level of discernment. And it's interesting because I'm reading this chapter in the book in which it was like I'm having a full 10-year reclamation of like why we did all this. But it was the reason we named it that was to have the level of precision to be able to separate poppy seed from soil. We want women to not need us anymore. That's our goal. We hope you outgrow us. We hope that you are the best health advocate for yourself. And that means having a level of discernment, but it's going to take time to get deeply curious, not critical, befriending all those parts of ourselves like, wow, I really seem to shame myself or I really seem to self-sabotage. If someone offers me a plate of food and even though I don't want to eat it, I don't want to make her feel bad, right? All these things that come up for us, if we don't sit with that and befriend those parts and challenge, where does that come from? Why do I think that? Where did I buy into that? Why did that become so habituated that I took that behavior and made it part of my personality instead of saying, oh, that's good girl conditioning. And I felt like I should because I didn't want to offend, but I can learn to position it and communicate in a way that's never offensive to another person, but also create safe boundaries around myself. Like, no, thank you. I'm good. Or right now I'm actually not hungry or whatever it is, right? We can find a really wonderful way to move through the world without having to hold it all in our body, which is why a lot of women seem to regain the trap of urgency and punishment, right? Like, when we start to restrict and overtrain, we then start to see how this works negatively on our own body, right? It's like, we see this all the time. And I get really curious with patients because as they go into maintenance, right, they might see some shifts in their body and they're like, my goodness. And it's like, okay, we're going to learn to breathe. Right? Like we are not the thing that's really important about this hormonal orchestration and this mindset piece around the hormonal orchestration is that we are genuinely not the same every single day like men. Men are circadian and how they function in a 24-hour period is how they function in a 24-hour period. We are on a whole different cycle. A 28-day cycle. Our brain, our biology, our cravings, our physiology is different on day 1 than it is day 24, right? So learning and not going urgent with every shift and change and not punishing. How do we get more compassionate? How do we have more self-love? How do we have more self-trust of like, oh, my body just does this. It's luteal. It retains water. Oh, I actually crave more carbohydrates. So I'm not going to deprive myself. I'm actually going to nourish myself. And when I nourish myself, I find that my body moves differently. It feels differently. I'm less stressed. I can sleep. There's just this beautiful orchestration and self-compassion. And this takes time. It comes from continuous shifts. We talk a lot about this in mindset of like one day at a time. You can't possibly know what you're going to feel 5 days from now, especially now that you know your brain is different every single day. So getting like really comfortable of like, I'm going to keep my word with myself, just this breath, just this next meal, just this next moment, just this next boundary setting I have to set. I'm just going to say something that's going to bridge before me just complying to everything and actually think about if it serves me to say yes to this, right? It is understanding that, one, you're not alone. You're not a unicorn, that these are commonalities that we all share and there is a solution. And when we start to put all these pieces together, it starts to come together in a very simplified and compassionate fashion where you start to compound your success and start being like, I think I can do this. Like I say it to you all the time, like, and I know you say it to me too with our patients, but like some patients who come in with no cooking skills, no confidence in the gym, you're unsure. You're like, I don't know if she's going to be able to figure this out. Fully buy in, just stay curious and try. And all of a sudden you have these women who are like, I love cooking. I crave healthy food. I am lifting weights. I'm going for walks. And you're watching this behavior change. And it's like, she just didn't know what she was capable of. And it's really beautiful to witness that that is available to all of us, that there's no person, there just needs to be a desire and a curiosity. And if those pieces are there, we've got you. Like we've got the resources to help facilitate that transformation. And it's really beautiful to witness. We are surprised all the time. And I love that for us. I love that we go on these beautiful adventures with these patients and we are in all of it for them. We are available for all of it for them. And we watch them blossom in every way. And you realize that if they have the skills, the tools, and the resources, and they feel better, they want to do it. No one taught us this stuff.
Yeah. 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 I really love what you just said about how we go on the journey with them. Like that is really exactly how it feels. Like from the beginning and even at the beginning, holding that trust for them, right? Before they believe it, before they know, we can hold that for them. And they will get there by the end. And it is really so, it's the most important work that someone can do is learn how to trust themselves. It is so much changes when that finally clicks for patients. And
Yeah, we're
it is
really
such,
blessed.
it's so
We're
beautiful.
really blessed
It
with the
is
best
really
job
so
in the world.
beautiful.
And
Yeah, that was all.
we just happen to love what we do. So we're very lucky.
We really are. We really are. We hope that you learned a lot today in listening to this and feel like you have more awareness of whatever a starting place looks like for you and feel curious about a lot of these pieces, right? I think that that's a shift too, is going from nothing works for me to maybe there are changes that I could make, or maybe there are resources or something that can move the needle for me. So we hope that this has given you hope and maybe, again, just some starting places. And if you would like to learn even more, I'm hosting a free masterclass all about this exact topic, why weight loss in perimenopause feels impossible. So it's April 29th at 7 p.m. at the Poppy Clinic. To register in the show notes. And we would love to see you there. If this is resonating, if this is the journey that you are in or going on right now, then we would love to support you in that masterclass and maybe afterwards in Shed if it feels like the right fit.
I'm going to
for
add
you.
one thing.
So
One
thank you
real
for taking the
benefit of
time to
joining
listen.
Tara
Yeah,
for
go ahead.
this conversation is that you get a free Embody, and Tara is masterful at explaining and helping you connect the dots. So if you are genuinely curious if everything that we talked about is your lived experience or parts of it, you're getting extra data on yourself. And it's such a beautiful opportunity to really make this tangible and to really see, not only do you see yourself and what's going on and this validates your lived experience, but if Shed could be the right solution for you. You should definitely, if you've been curious, been on the fence, you should definitely go and hang out with Tara for this masterclass, because not only is she a wealth of information, but you will leave really clear on what's going on with your body and what feels like the right next step for you.
Absolutely. We hope to see you there. Until then, stay wild.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Wild Medicine. I am so grateful to have you here, and I hope you're feeling inspired and empowered. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star rating. It helps us reach more incredible women just like you. And before you go, quick reminder, the information shared on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat any medical condition. Please consult with your healthcare provider for personalized advice and care. And if you're ready to take inspired action and dive deeper into your own health journey, please visit us at poppyclinic.com. Let's rewild and reset your health together.